In this video, we'll be talking about a class theory which is attached to Marxism. Something happened this semester at university.
Yeah.
I was studying political philosophy because it was quite a mandatory subject. I could have studied other stuff, but it was most tolerable of the stuff I didn't necessarily want to study by study.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed in this a lot is that when they were talking about Marxism, they were often misunderstanding the concept of the class theory.
Yeah.
And as I know, Sam, you also have a annoyance about people not understanding it as well. Is that correct?
Yep. It pisses me off to an nth degree. Yeah.
Explain why on your end.
Well, the ideology of the definition of what is working class has always been distorted due to the fact that working class people are the only class that sells their labour to the capitalist class. It does not mean that if someone is not selling their labour to the capitalist class, that they're not part of the working class. Hereditarily, they are still part of the working class. They are the reserved labour of capitalism, not the lumpen proletariat.
Okay, cool, that's enough. So, while we're talking about class, let's start from the very, very beginning, shall we? Let's start with what Marx first wrote about class. And don't worry, this isn't going to be purely about what Marx wrote. I have other sources as well, and this will be, and I've also got some book chapters to go through as well, just a paragraph or so from books as well to reinforce the point.
Yeah.
So we both know this like the back of our hand, obviously, but let's just go over this and let's go over what is critical to understand from this. One thing to go into before this is that any terminology used here. So let's say, okay, as for terminology, the only terminology that is needing to be continued is stuff surrounding the concept of lumpenproletariat, petty bourgeoisie, and proletariat.
Yeah.
The exact forms of what jobs take that place or what societal roles take those positions will vary drastically depending on the times and situations. So, just because it says a certain job or certain entitlement, that does not mean it is exclusively that, and that can be molded to a future development. With that covered, is there anything specific you want covered from chapter 1?
Well, I think that the nature of the working class has changed since development of what Marx had written. Mao Zedong and Lenin updated it more. I think Xi Jinping was more relevant on the subject to think that the nature of working class has changed. It's not an ideology now which used to be about just industrial proletarian, the whole proletarian in general. It has actually been a class that has been exploited, but it's a class that exploits itself within itself. Because there's always exploitation of working class people still exploiting people in their own class.
Yes, of course. For example, right, one thing from chapter 1 that's super important to mention is this one here. The feudal system of industry in which industrial production was monopolized by closed guilds now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturer system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Divisions of the labour between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of the division of labour in each workshop. And this is a good analogy to show how the actual division we are now facing has been a systematic change in which the actual nature of what is work, what is your status
Yes.
in working society has changed.
Also, I mean, within the ideology of what they've said about aristocracy of labour, for example, the trade union movement are predominantly made up of skilled labour, skilled workers, right? Predominantly, they are skilled workers. They are plumbers, they are miners, they are electricians, they are time workers. What?
Was that?
Oh shit! Did your fucking thing have a spastic attack?
No, it didn't.
Oh, okay.
Start that sentence from the very beginning, please.
I was going to say that the aristocracy of labour that persists in the working class means there's an aristocracy based on labour, of which the skill levels of working class people, predominantly in the trade labour movements, such as, plumbers, electricians, construction workers, miners, people in these very hierarchical, high paying jobs, right? Become the fantasy now of what working class is. It excludes people who do not go and sell their labour. It excludes the unemployed, and it has almost a fetishisation of skilled labour jobs and skilled workers to be called working class. You must be a skilled worker, not an unskilled worker. Unskilled workers and labourers and people on the bottom are on the bottom rung of the ladder, and they're on the top. So there's like an aristocracy. It's not egalitarian at all.
Okay, that's fine to say. Also, another example from chapter 1 for the manifesto. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the issues of production and therefore the relations of production, and with them the whole relation of society, conservation of all modes of production in another form was, on the contrary, the first condition of existence for all the early industrial classes. And
Yes.
and this is the and okay, to translate what this means. This means to say is that there needed to be a class system in place because of the nature of industry. And before
Of course.
people say that corporations today are not like the earlier capitalism of the past. But if you say that, I will argue against your point here. The core point here surrounding this is that if you compare the old industrial factories to the keep saying say still Sam.
Yeah.
If you compare the old industrial factories to the modern corporations, for example, they are very similar in some aspects. The old factories and modern corporations operate under a model which ultimately strips workers of their actual justified rights,
Yes.
underpaid and overworked, as well as ultimately, in many cases, having a heavy anti union policy in a lot of the hardline cases. And
Oh,
that
yes.
and that is something in which, while you may say, this is made in X year. Yes, it is
Mm.
made in the past. So what? That does not mean it's inferior.
Exactly. The past is only relevant to the social economic conditions of the future. As Marx pointed out, dialectical materialism, the material conditions of society will only change once the social economic conditions change. The reality of the world around us will change our thinking. Our thoughts can't change the reality of the world around us. So whatever you think, it won't make it so. The material conditions make it so, won't they? You there, man?
Oh, yes, yes, I am. I was just getting this done. And also, to highlight this point even further, the bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to the production and consumption to every country. To the great, to the great chain, Chaglin of reactionists, it is drawn from under the feet of industry the national ground on which it stood. An old established national industry has been destroyed or are daily being destroyed. They are being dislodged by new industries whose introduction becomes a life and death question for all civilized nations by industries that no longer work up indigenous raw materials, but raw materials drawn from remote zones, industries whose products are consumed not only at home but in every corner of the globe.
Well, this is actually an interesting point because this is when we're seeing the infantile stages of imperialism. I know the Dutch East Indies Company, there was the Niger Shipping Company, the Dutch East Indies Company, and I know that there was already at the point Marx had written this book, Britain's imperialist empire's expansion to India and, of course, Australia and other countries, right? And of course, the Spanish were expanding their empire, and the Dutch, the Portuguese, and colonial powers were. And this makes an interesting point: exploitation of indigenous labour and land. So you could look at this point and say that this was when the First World was becoming prosperous by exploiting the land and kingdoms of the colonised people, weren't they?
And also, in the Governance of China Volume 2 by Xi Jinping, on page 370, it says, second, philosophy and social sciences with Chinese features must display originality and zeitgeist. Mindlessly imitating others cannot lead us to philosophy and social sciences adopted to our own conditions or solutions for our own problems. Mao Zedong remarked back in 1944, our attitude is that of critical acceptance of our own historical heritage and of foreign thought. We are against blind acceptance as well as blind rejection of any ideas. We Chinese must think of our own brains and must decide for ourselves what we can grow on our own soil. We must put forward subjective, original theories and views on the basis of studying Chinese conditions and construct disciplinary and academic and discourse systems with our own features. This is the only way for Chinese philosophy and social sciences to develop independent properties and strengths.
Yeah, this is one of the points that this is one of the points that shows the ideology of socialism from colonized countries where they have actually had successful proletarian revolutions. If you were compared the social conditions in, I don't know, say Australia and Mexico, right? Okay, you can understand the comparison, can't you?
Yes, I can.
Because Australia never had a feudalist stage of its economic development as a country, neither did the United States, right? England had the history of feudalistic development in the United Kingdom and Europe, which had feudalistic development. Even India and most other Asian countries had pre-existing textiles and industries prior to European colonisation, right?
Correct.
Yet Australia had none of these and no actual feudalist development. So our development as a country, development of our working class was, well, heavily distorted by the
Sam, you're acting weird. Sam. You left off at heavily distorted.
fuck happened?
There's a
Okay, I just got back.
you left off a heavily distorted.
Okay. Sorry, let's put it back on now. I was going to say that Australia did not have a feudalist development stage. Neither did the United States. So in a way, I find it interesting that we both never had that stage of development that they had in Europe. Because we had no feudalist stage of our development, it was heavily distorted how our viewpoints are on procedure of working class, how we can succeed from one class to another. This illusion is part of what capitalism teaches you, but in England and other countries, there was that period of feudalism which we didn't have. Did you hear that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. You finish your point.
Well, so we have a very distorted viewpoint on what is working and middle class because without that feudalist stage of development, we don't have that cognitive understanding of the development socially and economically that existed in European countries. The dialectical material conditions of Australia's development are different in that aspect to most European countries, and in some aspects similar to the United States in not having that feudalist stage of development.
Sam. Also, in the Governance of China, Volume 1, page 414, it said, "It takes courage to face problems and to try and solve them, and this means taking the initiative. Disasters often result from neglecting the smallest things. The wise and brave are often trapped by their own mind indulgences. Developing a habit of regularly straightening one's clothes and hat will prevent small wrongdoings from growing into some big ones, and can effectively protect against the falling feathers submerging a boat and an excessive load breaking an axle." Do you understand that? Do you understand that example?
Yeah, it's pretty much an example similar to Mao's examples he used. I understand the example, yeah.
Back to the core point of chapter 1. Chapter 1. It's also in chapter 1. In proportion as the bourgeoisie, i.e., capital, was developed in the same proportion as the proletariat, the modern working class developed a class of labourers. And as I said in the beginning, when it says class of labourers, it can be something else entirely today, or something similar to, or both. It doesn't necessarily matter to the context, because what the whole point is that these are just analogies written of his time. And as I was saying, who lived only so long as they can find work, and who can only find work only as long as the labour increases capital. These labourers who must sell themselves piecemeal as a commodity, like every other article of commerce, and are consequently exposed to all the things of competition, to all fluctuations of the market.
Yep, that sounds exactly like what I've been doing for most of my life.
It's up to everyone, not just you.
I know that. I'm just saying it's an example I can really relate to, and I first read it.
Enough of this one. Let's go into chapter 2. Can you see it? Chapter 2?
Proletarian and the communist.
Yes, correct. Is there any point you want to say in this section?
Working class parties. Working class and specified opportunities of other working class parties. Let me have a look at. Let's have a look at this.
Sure, that's fine. I would assume you already know it in the first place, but sure, we can look.
I would, sure, working class shapen model. This is the instruction model for everything that the fucking CPA never fucking was.
Okay. I've read this enough times myself. Where do you want to specifically shine a light to in this?
I think that the model of differentiation of class in the party, proletarian, the differentiation of points.
Sorry, where's that? Point
It
me.
was at the start, the principles of ownership of shaping the model of the proletarian movement.
Okay, cool. You can say it
Well,
then.
I was going to say that dialectical materialism plays a role in the development of capitalism that does determine then the role that the proletarian movement, as they call it, will be shaped because the social, economic, and political conditions change, the nature of the working class changes. As a result of that, dialectical materialism means the Communist Party must change its perspectives to meet the changing circumstances and relevancy of the world around them. This is one of the points I think are, which I think comes into play with the modern Communist Party and the movement. Karl Marx also said, if the Communist Party does not change to meet the change in social, economic, and social circumstances, it will then lose its relevancy with the working class and will become irrelevant.
Cool.
So,
Sam. Also, in Governance of China, Volume 2, again on page 370, it says the life of a theory lies in innovation, which is the perpendicular theme of the development of philosophy and social sciences, and prerequisite and sorry and requisite of social, practical, and historical progress. As
yeah.
human as human society continues to evolve, new circumstances and new problems arise. Some can be tackled with existing experience and approaches, some others cannot. Without the creation and application of new thought, concepts, and methods through timely study, theories will be impotent in the face of reality, and philosophy and social sciences will be lame and facet. Innovation in philosophy and social sciences can come in many forms, but it can mean discovering a rule, founding a school of thought, illustrating a truth, or finding a solution to a specific problem.
Hmm. You know, I really like Xi's thinking. I mean, he's a lot similar to Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping in most of his thinking when he looks at most Chinese philosophical thinking. But he's also a social realist and he deals with the social economic reality of the world around him. It's something that's very much lacking now on the left. Do you reckon it is?
And anyway, to clarify to people wondering why we're going over all these random ass theories before actually covering what it even is,
Yeah,
it's super important to understand these concepts straight away. Because much of the class analysis is based on actual economics and actual political theory.
of
it's
course.
it's 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 more of a hybrid model between the two. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a proper understanding of proper dialectical understanding of things, it's going to lead you to have a distorted vision of what class theory even is.
But that pretty much sounds like every fucking other party apart from ours and the entire left. They have no idea what working class is, do they? They don't have any idea, man.
Sam, where are you going? I'll get beer, okay? I was getting a beer. Is that what you're doing?
Oh no, get my phone.
Oh, fine. Sorry. That's fine.
I wasn't getting a beer, mate. I had my free beer tonight.
Fair enough. Anyway, back to the core point. The average price of a wage labor is the minimum wage, i.e., the quantum of the means of substance which is absolutely requisite to keep the labourer in bare existence as a labourer. What
Yeah.
therefore the wage labourer appropriates by means of his labour merely suffices to prolong and reproduce a bare existence. We by no means intend to abolish this personal appropriation, the means of labour, an appropriation which is made for the maintenance and reproduction of human life and needs no surplus to, where within to command the labour of others. All that we want to do is a way of the miserable character that displays of this appropriation, under which the labourer merely lives to increase capital and is allowed to live only so far as the interest of the ruling class requires it. And this is why it's super important to understand this sort of theory now, because a lot of the classifications, especially the one by Mao, is very, very specific. So, for example, right, under the one by Marx and the early Marxism, it goes, Laben proletariat, proletariat, petty bourgeoisie, bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
That is the simple format. So, let's
Yeah.
actually move on to the next source.
Yeah.
Not that one. This one. Here you go.
Yeah.
For example, as it says here, a social class, as you've seen, is the aggregate of a person playing the same part in production, standing in the same relation towards a person in production process.
Mm.
And those who may be thinking now, this sounds awfully inhumane. What about your own individuality and your own individual lives? That's the point here, is that
Mm.
it's talking
Yeah.
about production, not to say you have no individuality or have no individual rights. It's talking about production because it's the production lies in capitalism itself, which is destroying that, not Marx's theory.
Yeah.
And as it continued to say, these relations are also expressive instruments of labour. It follows that in the process of distribution of the common element of each class is a uniform source of income. For the
Yeah.
condition in the distribution of products and are determined by conditions in production. Textile workers and metal workers are not two separate classes but a single class, since they bear the same relation to each other persons, engineers, capitalists.
Yeah.
Similarly, the proprietors of a mine, a brick, a brick field, a corset factory are all of one class. For regardless of the physical differences between the things they manufacture, they simply occupy a common commanding position with regard to the persons engaged in the process of production, which proportion is expressed in things capital.
Yeah.
And this is why it's super important to understand what Marx was meaning first.
Yes.
Then you can probably see then how it leads on to more advanced research into this. What I'm trying to say here is that the whole theory itself wasn't something which was born in the 18th century and died in the 18th century. It's something
Yeah.
which developed.
Yeah.
The production relations are therefore on the basis of class alignment in society. Other divisions have been made, which must be now be disposed of. A frequent conception is the division of classes into poor and rich. A man having twice as much money in his pocket as another is considered as belonging to another class on the basis of division of being the case. The amount possessed of standard living, an English sociologist has gone too far. Okay. The potential relations are therefore at the basis of class alignment in society. Our divisions have been made, which now must be disposed of. A frequent conception is that divide between class of poor and rich. A man having twice as much in his pocket as another is now considered belonging to a different class on the basis of division being in the case to possess the lower a standard of living. has gone too far as to say draw a table. The first in those class proposed for a budget of 18 shillings
Yep.
per. And this is also another way class was brought in, being highlighted,
Yeah.
where it's now formed much of the more common conception of class. For example, based on income areas rather than actual production values.
Yeah.
Do you, and how important do you think that signifier is?
Well, it's a pretty important signifier, but it kind of also doesn't really look at the fact that somebody at one point when people can move up that stratosphere and earn more money in their pockets, so going from unskilled labour jobs to skilled labour jobs, they moved up in that ranking. So they did change. Did that mean that they no longer were working class and became middle class? I
Not
mean, that
and that's my point I'm trying to say here. No, it doesn't actually mean that at all. Not necessarily, because as you know, and as we've been living through now,
yeah,
inflation, inflation, cost of living costs, and so on. Basically, the amount of income someone earns doesn't necessarily determine class so much in terms of Marxism. It's
it does though. It does though. It
it does to
determines
a degree. Yes, I
hold on.
agree. It does to a degree. Let me finish my sentence first,
Yes,
and I'll clarify what I mean. Yes, of course, what you earn does matter, but it's more in proportion to other things. For example, like what you can afford. Can you afford with what you're earning to actually afford a future, afford a house, afford food, so on.
yes, yes.
And that's why I said, well, technically speaking, yeah. That's why I said, technically speaking, yes, but it's not the whole indicator.
Mm. But I do think that there was a point when the capitalist class used this to distort class ideologies to make sure that they could, make a comfortable level of working class people to become comfortable enough to divide the working class.
Sorry about that. Back. What was I saying?
I was saying that when they make people's wages higher, the ruling class did it because they wanted the working class to be comfortable and to create a comfortable level for the working class, enough so they would not revolt and go burn the whole place to the goddamn ground.
Exactly the point. And that is a differentiation between the actual wages being increased, just generally speaking. Because the thing is, even if the wages are increased, does that necessarily mean you have more stability or security? No.
Of
Because the
course.
thing is, if the prices around your life is also increased as well, in turn, it means as well that you are also going to be in a trapped situation in which you need to be trapped in the wage earning situation, which is often what happens to most people.
Of course.
And this I think is enough backdrop to move in to the next section, which is talking about Mao. Are you ready, Sam?
Yeah. I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. The analysis of classes in Chinese society, March 1926.
Yeah.
This is another step in the progress of the theory itself.
Yeah.
Something to note here is when talking about Chinese society, as mentioned earlier, we're talking
Yeah.
about something in which there was a distinctive feudal stage.
Yes.
Much like Europe, there was an actual distinctive feudal state. Much like Russia, there was a distinctive feudal state.
Exactly. Yes.
And that is where the differentiation is. So if it's talking about stuff linking to feudalism and all that stuff, that's why. So let's get onto it. Let's start at the lowest of this ranking.
Yep.
Under Mao, it still starts with Lumpen Proletariat at the lowest,
Yep.
where he says, the Lumpen Proletariat, made up of peasants who have lost their land and handcraftsmen who cannot get work. They lead most precarious existence of all in every part of the country and have their secret societies, which originally the mutual aid organizations for political and economic struggle. For instance, the Tri Society, and so on. One of China's greatest problems is how to
Yes.
handle these people, brave fighters, but apt to be destructive, and they can become a revolutionary force if given proper guidance. But also other things, and also Marx also said they can also be used as unwilling tools of the bourgeoisie.
Yes.
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you all look at that, it actually does show how when fascism started, they actually did do that quite a lot to undermine the working class by getting sections of it who were the lower sections of the working class to do the ruling class's dirty work. They were always the footmen for the ruling class, weren't they, when they recruited?
Okay, cool. And that, for example, is the very lowest in both forms of Marx and Mao.
Yeah,
Others later, others later take out the Marx's cynicalism by saying they have the potential to be the greatest revolutionary potential, but that
yeah,
is neither here nor there. I'm stating that as a citation because that is also an opinion also possessed.
yeah,
Okay, next. Proletariat. This is still the same. Proletariat,
yeah,
pretty much, it's pretty obvious what the proletariat is.
yeah.
Do we need to go over do we need to just even define what the proletariat is?
No,
I guess though for those who are completely ignorant about Marxism, we probably should do at least some very basic one.
sure, okay.
Basically, the proletariat is basically wage slaves and workers. That's it. Enough said.
Yes.
What's on your phone, Sam? That's so interesting.
Oh, nothing. It's just got something else turned off. There you go. Yeah. No, no, I just got something that I
Okay.
was reading about tomorrow. Anyway,
Uh,
yeah,
this is where Mao says something actually new and interesting. The semi-proletariat, because Mao actually has a more subcategories.
hmm.
And what do you think of these subcategories?
Categories of docket of date, feudal system. There's Mao's movement. What proletarian, lumpen semi-proletarian.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes, we are on semi-proletarian.
So like they're like the old artisan class or artisans who are like, you would pretty much say they're petty bourgeoisies, really.
Um, not yet, not yet, according to Mao. But there is a petty bourgeoisie, of course, in the listing.
Of course, he said here that they're a artisan class. So that would be like someone who's a sculptor or an artist or someone who does, makes their money out of their own labour but doesn't sell it and sells it to the capitalist class, but they control their own means of production.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And that's it. So it's still basically the border ground between a worker who still doesn't have enough control in their lives, but still has more control than most.
Yes, I understand. I am an artist after all.
You ready now? You ready now?
Yeah, I'm ready. I was going to say that because when you're an artist, I think when you're an artist, you can look at that and you can say that sort of artists could fall into that category, musicians could fall in that category. You reckon?
Oh yeah, sure. Yes, fair enough.
Because in a way, it's like still a skilled labour that is, not made from the ruling class's benefit, but they have to still make money out of their own labour.
Okay. And
costs.
and as we and for example, right? Okay, and now we're back to the similarities. The petty bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
And this is the one that needs significant clarification here.
Yeah.
I looked past I just skipped past the proletariat for obvious reasons because it's so easy to know what it is. You don't need a Marxist 101 to explain what the proletariat is.
No, you don't.
Or you shouldn't need it if you're good at, or you shouldn't need it if you have a working brain.
Yeah.
Okay, but what the petty bourgeoisie is actually really much more important.
Yeah.
The petty bourgeoisie is often where the confusion lies. Because this is where people who want to support capitalism but who never become capitalists fall into. The middle ground of basically the pit of despair in other forms.
So small business owners, for example, shop owners who own independent outlets or independent shops, but still have to work in their business because they still have to work in their own businesses. And they also have to compete with big bourgeoisie as well as
correct.
Big bourgeoisie. So this is where the contradiction comes in between petty bourgeoisie, the small businessmen, and the multinationals like Woolworths and Coles and the large multinationals, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But ultimately, Sam, you should know that, shouldn't you?
Of course, I know that, man. I got quite a lot of education from the CPA and from a little education from the Socialist Alliance, a little education from the DSP. Got education from everywhere, really.
But the point is, to anyone watching it, if you are watching anyway, in this educational video, is that the petty bourgeoisie is ultimately the thing in which is if people miss this phase in the hierarchy we're dealing with here, it can distort images of it. Because then on the classical thing, the lowest is proletariat.
Yeah.
And then people can say proletariat and then jump straight to jump straight to middle bourgeoisie. Which is the Maoist one for bourgeoisie.
Well, so big bourgeoisie, not petty bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that because you say bourgeoisie, you should clarify whether it's a petty bourgeoisie or the bourgeoisie.
Yes. I know. I'm doing that. That's
I
why
know, I know.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm doing this. And as I was saying, the petty bourgeoisie is a distinction in which this is where most people end up being in if they are aspiring capitalists.
Mm.
They want to, as was mentioned, small business owners, who want to try and make their own way in life or progress, and as a direct result, they think they are living the capitalist path, but ultimately are equally as vulnerable, equally as much, then the proletariat to the whims of the market.
Yep.
Or, in other words, these are wannabe capitalists who have not reached the point of too big to fail yet.
So they're petty bourgeoisie aspiring to be big bourgeoisie that they know very well that, well,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
still,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. In some cases. Yes. In some cases, they never leave being petty bourgeoisie. In some cases, they might become bigger bourgeoisie. In some cases, they never leave it. In some cases, they lose that and downgrade to semi proletariats.
mm, yeah, they run their fish and chip business and it gets put out of business by beating these people. Sorry, Pauline.
Anyway, next one. Middle bourgeoisie, and this is the middle bourgeoisie in relation to this is what would be in classical Marxism the baseline of the top of the hierarchy, which is just bourgeoisie.
Yeah. Chinese towns and countries, the bourgeoisie's spoken to attitude of low rate of Chinese advise me a feed of a full revolution and fever of revolutionary avocation against imperialism, social warlords, and as assimilation of foreign capital and warlords. Okay, yeah. So into the proletariat. Yeah, okay.
For example, difference between petty bourgeoisie. Okay, I won't call it middle bourgeoisie. I just call it the bourgeoisie. Um, difference between the bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie is, as you can tell, the bourgeoisie has more capital, more stability, and this is where they can get into areas of too big to fail territories and less market instability,
Yeah,
potentially. And that makes also a massive disconnect. This is where the distinction of leaving out petty bourgeoisie out of the equation can make it really problematic. Because then all you're left with under that dynamic in terms of classical interpretation is bourgeoisie proletariat.
yeah,
And that makes a huge fatal error in judgment.
yeah, definitely. Especially when you start to call the proletariat, love it proletariat, which, as Lenin said, are a criminal class associated with prostitution, drug dealing, and criminality. People who would carry out harm, robberies, and were a criminal class that goes from anarchism to fascism and is not identified as part of the working class, then you'll call an unemployed people lumpen proletariat, then you've got a big mistake on your hands.
Correct. And the final one under this one is this one, the landlord and comprador class.
Yeah.
An economically backward and semi-colonial China, landlord class and the comprador class are wholly appendages of the international bourgeoisie. Depending on the depending upon imperialism for their survival and growth. These classes represent the most backward and most reactionary relation of production in China and hinder development for her productive forces. Their existence is utterly incompatible with the aims of the Chinese Revolution. The big landlord and the big comprador classes particularly sides with imperialism and constitute an extremely counter-revolutionary groups. Their political representations are the yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And this is something I do like about this classification. Because as much as people may say this is a much more complicated methodology to talk about class,
Yeah.
it's this one is very close to reality.
Because there is the landowner class, which actually means like the landed gentry and people who become what they call landed gentry.
For example, if you were to update this into one date, I would probably say I'd probably put this and nothing above it. I'll put I'll put probably landlord slash land owning class,
Yeah.
and then put multinational corporations and
Yeah.
above that. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. The final source for this, and then this will end our thing. This is from 1972.
Yep.
And this is the heart of the evolution. Because if you've been following now, we've done the Communist Manifesto, Chapter 1, Chapter 2,
Yep.
Bukharin, Nikolai Bukharin,
Mm.
Mao, and now
Yep.
let's finish on Carl Davidson.
Yes.
One theory which seems to be laid to rest within the US left is that the new working class. It has appeared and reappeared in various guises in the past decade or so. First in a rough through the work of C. Wright Mills, later in propaganda of several SDS left-wing activists, including writers who were influenced sometimes by certain European new Marxist revisionists. And this is also another critical thing you need to understand about this. Revisionism itself is super important to keep in check.
Mm.
Also, when doing this, if you become revisionist, you lose the way.
Yeah.
It is still being tossed around today with several left intellectual journals such as New Politics and Socialist Revolution. But in extreme terms, the theory takes two apparent opposite forms. In the view of the contemporary class structure, either the proletariat is disappearing or everyone is a proletarian.
Mm.
Thoughts on that?
That sounds like the idea that proletarian disappear, everyone is proletarian. Shit, that's going in some pretty fucking dodgy territory there.
Yes, I know.
I'm just looking at it thinking, in a postmodernist perspective on this, it had come in perspective of the US. Can I ask you something? Is this dude a trot by any chance?
Might be yes, but it's still interesting. Some interesting points of how commentary about it has evolved.
It just sort of sounds a bit kind of Trotskyist, that's all.
I think it is, but that's not the point. I think it is, but as I've been showing the evolution of it.
I mean, it just sounds like the working class will fade away or everyone will become a proletarian. Well,
Because ultimately, what I'm saying is, just because I cite it doesn't mean I have to agree with it. You can disagree with it. That's fine.
I know I'm disagreeing with it. I'm just pointing out that it just seems like, I don't know, like a total lack of any foresight to the fact that the US, for example, is so economically divided between working class and ruling class. And even in the working class themselves, there are the agricultural proletariat in the southern regions of the US, which have way less industrialized regions, and the highly industrialized northern part of the United States, which has an industrial proletariat. And so it seems like they're trying to divide the working class between the two and almost kind of say either, and what he's saying about the working class will disappear, but
but the thing is though, the reason I use the source is because of this claim here anyway. I mean, you can disagree with anything I say, anything the authors say. Sorry, anything you can disagree with anything the authors say at any point. There's no mandatory just get along and agree with it, is there? Continuing from a slight technical issue now fixed. Okay. The point is that this segment here I found quite interesting, and I want your views on this segment about it, because this is from a later source, and it is really interesting to compare and contrast. That's all.
no, intelligentsia. Okay. Oh, okay.
Well,
Well, it says here a view on the intelligentsia, an example of a large group of people mainly emerging from material work in organised and agrarian conditions of work and production.
I know it says that, but this is just something interesting of a wild card, because I always like to include a little wild card just to check, just for fun.
Was good.
And okay, as a wild card, what do you think of this wild card, and how do you think it connects with the analysis we've done?
Well, the Marxist intelligentsia. Hmm. Yeah, it fits in okay. The small numbers of the intelligentsia, in other words, the intellectuals.
And anyway, to finish it off, do you want to have any final end notes to work off? Sorry, do you want anything to finish it off with, because we've now
Yeah,
covered all the course material.
I'd like to end it on the note by looking at Marx and dialectical materialism and the material conditions of the reality we live in the world around us. That says about Marxism being objective, not subjective. The reality of the world around us changes our thinking. Our thoughts don't change the reality of the world around us. And how the material conditions have changed dramatically in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and dramatically decreased in Western countries, but increased in countries like China, where I would say the material conditions in capitalism, but communist parties have failed to understand the change in social, economic, and political conditions and nature of the working class. Henceforth, they have become irrelevant from the class they actually seek to actually uphold. They no longer have any relevancy to.
And in those cases, yes, they would fall into revisionism and therefore lost the appeal and mass support from people. Correct.
And it really does prove that China and socialist countries have managed to maintain proletarian revolution and the mass support of the people by never losing the fact that the party is materially based on the social economic conditions of the people. And as communists, we always must remember that. We should, you reckon?
The most important factor in this isn't necessarily about any countries or any degree of nationalism. It's instead rather that the core message is, regardless of how much the new industries arise, no matter how much filler work and filler jobs pop in, no matter
Yep.
how much the actual industrial environment changes, the key point about talking about class analysis is to talk about the relationship with it to and around capitalism.
Of course, the means of production of labour.
Correct. And ultimately, if it exists within a capitalist exploitation, it exists within a class analysis.
Exactly.
And therefore, there should be less muddying the water about this. It's
Exactly.
a very, very simple topic. And
It is
yes, and yes,
tough.
I know this one's over an hour long, so that's just mostly because I want to make it a good, clear explanation of the topic properly,
Yeah,
as to make sure there is no confusion.
of course.
And with that, that'll be it for today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the effort, and I'm very glad I could contribute to helping you out, Brandon.